look at the DNA there.
All right, let's keep on the rocket. All right, let's keep on rocking. Two things to clarify real quick. I don't think I did a good job with the QT interval and this. There's also a term that when I went through my class, I heard for lidocaine, which is not saying it's in your program, but if you hear this phrase, you'll know what it means. And it's lidocaine raises the threshold for VFib and VTAC. So if lidocaine is a fast sodium channel blocker, right? So we'll say this is the area of effects. Then that in essence raises this threshold. So it makes it's harder for the cell to fire off. And that raises, so this is the current threshold, is that voltage gate. You have to have enough slow sodium to leak in before it opens up fast sodium channels. That's called a threshold. And if you push lidocaine, you in essence raise the threshold for that cell to fire off. So this one now disappears. And that's your new electrical level you have to reach to get the fast sodium channel level. Now, if that makes sense. That was one thing that I didn't go over earlier, but I wanted to clarify that. That's how lidocaine raises the threshold. And the other one is amiodarone. We know it affects the repolarization phase right here. And it slows down the QT interval. Well, I should have laid a little bit of foundation first. First, this is the normal looking electrical, sinus rhythm you'll see on the cardiac monitor. And I'm just going to label them because I didn't do it really very good earlier. P, Q, R, S, and a T wave. So each one of these is a wave. And anytime you do more than one wave, it's called a complex. So you'll commonly hear people say the QRS complex, or you might people might refer to the T wave, because it's only one thing, or the P wave, or the R wave. And then when you measure in between these waves, it's called an interval. So the QT interval is from the onset of this Q wave, which would be right here, to the ending of the T wave. So that's called a QTI, or a QT interval. It's just like the initials for a QT interval, the QTI. And all it's really saying is, if you lengthen this QT interval, you're slowing down repolarization. It allows the cell to fire off like it normally does, but it takes longer for it to reach the end of repolarization. So therefore, it slows down the cardiac rhythm. That makes sense? Okay, I just wanted to clarify those two things real quick, and then we'll press on. I'm just going to erase this. We're going to talk about arterial blood gases, ABGs. The reason we're going to cover the weed. The reason we're going to cover ABGs isn't because I expect you to go out there and start reading ABGs. The reason is because if you understand them, you'll understand how the body, how it compensates for acid-base balance. We'll have to learn acid-base balance, I believe, part of the program. So understanding ABGs. Understanding. Welcome back. ABG. You do. All right, there's some things you need to know about arterial blood gases. First is what the normal pH level is. See what y'all know here. It's a pretty good guess. 7.0 is neutral. I think it's a little bit. The way it works with pH is the lower the number, the higher the concentration of acid, which is weird. I didn't create this system. This is just the stupid system we have. The closer you get to 7.0, so let's draw a spectrum here. This is a 0, and this is 14. So guess what 7 is in the middle? Do you think it's acid or do you think it's neutral?
I guess was right.
7.0 is neutral. So water should be about neutral. This has stuff added to it. It's got electrolytes for taste, but the pH of this should be about 7. I don't know what they've added to it. Does anyone know what the pH of normal saline is? Sodium chloride. Can someone go get a normal saline bag so we can see what it is? You know where they're at? Very, very back. You might have to take my key. So you can grab a bag of normal saline. It'll be interesting to see what the normal saline. Oh, grab lactated ringers also, please.
Yes.
And saline. Yep, that'd be great. So on one side of this, we have acid. So the lower the number, the higher the acid level. So like Coca-Cola is like a 3.0. And you know, you've heard of people like falling into vats of Coke, and then like being dissolved completely. Have you ever heard of stuff like that? Yeah, supposedly, I don't know if it's true or not. Suppose that happened somewhere. And then base or alkali. So this is alka. Alkalic or alkalosis. So that's the base side of things. The higher that number, the more alkalotic it is. So it's on like a spectrum. And you're going to learn acid-base balance as we go. But that's just a kind of quick intro to it.
So all these companies that are coming out with waters that are like different pHs.
Yeah, they do have. Yep.
I was told, and I don't know if it's true, that it doesn't really matter because once they hit your stomach, then it's gonna be the same pHs.
I don't know about that. A lot of the ones you see are more alkalic, like alkalic water.
Yeah.
And the idea is if you're exercising a lot, you have a lot of built up lactic acid. I don't know if the stomach acid would neutralize if it's quick enough. I don't know. I would think after a while you kind of thin out the acid that's in your gut. So maybe some of it does make it through.
Okay.
Maybe. I don't know. It doesn't have the pH on it, which is kind of weird.
6.4 to 7.4.
So it's somewhere between 6.4 to 7.4. So somewhere in the middle of it. I think that's what this is, my part. So it's pH balanced. I don't know what they mean by their how they balanced it, but this one it's got some bicarbonate in it. So this has got magnesium sulfate and potassium bicarbonate. Interesting.
Some got potassium chloride.
Yeah, that's usually some flavor. Some flavor in there.
And minerals.
This Aquafina says, I ain't telling you nothing.
They make you work for a lactate range.
Found them.
Yeah, finally. Well, I had to dig for the lactate range. They didn't have.
So this is normal saline. And somewhere on here is the pH. Here. So normal saline is a range between, let's mark this out a little bit. That's 7, so this would be what? Somewhere in this range. 3.5, something like that, right? And I don't know what the numbers are. So this would be 10, I'm guessing, I don't know, something like this. So this is between 4, this is about 5.6. Sorry about that. So 5.6. So 5.6, somewhere in this zone here is normal saline. So this is a great example on, well, hold on, let's look up for real quick.
My word is 7.2.
Hey, you have 7.4. So
Is that 5.6 for normal saline?
yeah, that's 5. Yeah. So when you look on the label, it tells you how much salt's in here, it tells you everything. What temperature to keep this at? It says pH adjusted to 5.6. That's fine.
It's on 6.2.
Really?
Yeah. It's a little old. water's like.
Here is it at 6.5. 6.5. Who just said that they had something that had 6 point something?
Me, 6 points.
Yeah.
What is it? Design?
That's the sound he punches there, so cheap water.
So let's say you have a patient that is a trauma patient and they're not breathing very well. And they have a lot of acid that's built up and they're acidotic, right? Would you want to give when you do fluid resuscitation for that patient, would you want to give them normal saline that is 4.5 or 5.4, whatever it is? Or do you think it would be better to give them lactated ringers? Lactated ringers, and that's why you're seeing a lot of our trauma care for fluid resuscitation. The saline is kind of going the way of care. We used to give everyone 1 or 2 bags of saline. We're just making them even more acidotic. So the ringers is a better way to go. So there was a lactated ringers. There was a doctor that made this hormone. Guess what his name is? Ringers. Yeah, Ringers lactate is what it was originally called. He's a pediatric pulmonologist. And he was trying to create a fluid that helped buffer acid in pediatric patients that were acidotic for acidosis. So he came up with this formula. It's been changed a little bit over the years, but it's basically the same thing. But it's a lot more pH balance for the person than salt water.
That's what, in my initial class, that's what they banged in our head.
Yeah,
You had a trauma patient, you gave LR.
yeah.
And then it went away. And then it
You know,
came back.
everything in medicine is on its
Everything.
big. Like mass trousers right now are horrible. They'll be done.
Those are back in my.
Right now, oxygen and backboard are on the out.
Yeah.
Instead of backboard.
Well, listen, I'm all about that.
Yeah, we had that lady sell downstairs, we had backboard.
So no one's selling what?
Normal saline
Is
is 5.6. Ringers was 6.4, like the same as your water,
6.5.
6.5, whatever I said it was.
Yeah.
But it's important because you need to know this for your down the road. You do not give blood products with lactated ringers. It'll fail on the bag. It says do not administer simultaneously with blood. That means in the same line. So if you're gonna hang blood, and I hope that one day we all have blood to hang, it's got to be hung with saline. But then we'll start another line and we'll give ringers to the other line for the fluid resuscitation. That's right. So, like on the helicopter, for example, if you got a trauma patient, if we hang blood, PXA and blood, it's going to go through this, and then but we'll hang another line of ringers. Ringers is the way to go. It's better for burn patients and everything. So that's just all foundational stuff to talk about. Let's see. Everyone's good with that?
Gotta have that.
That's right. Okay, so our normal pH is 7.35 to 7.45. Does anyone know what your normal CO2 level is? We put some on a little nasal cannula.
35 to 45.
Bam! And an easy way to remember, firefighter,
Yeah.
is 35 to 45. Well, remember how I told you that this scale is stupid and backwards? We're going to write those numbers backwards. So it's going to be 45 to 35. The reason why is because as the acid level builds up in you, when it's exhaled, it's read as a higher number, right? So as your acid level goes up, it'll go up, your pH goes up. Sorry, when your pH goes down, your CO2 level goes up. This is how crazy the system is. Because as your hydrogen ion goes up, your pH drops, meaning that you have more acid, higher CO2 levels. To counteract that craziness, we're going to write these numbers backwards. Because as this number goes up, that means this number is going down. And as this number goes down, this number goes up. So if I blow off a bunch of CO2, that's going to actually cause my pH level to rise, which means I have less acid in the body because I'm blowing it off. Does that make sense? Or let's say, you know what, everyone knows what Lasix is, right?
Mhm.
If my patient takes overdoses on Lasix, they just start dumping, peeing like crazy. they're gonna pee off a bunch of acid and this number goes up.
Huh.
But since they move opposite each other, we're gonna write them opposite here. The CO2 is 45 to 35. And then there's another one you probably never heard of. It's HCO3, which is okay. And that's the amount of bicarbonate that we're producing.
And what does HCO3 stand for?
Bicarbonate.
Bicarb?
Yep. What produces bicarb?
The land above the.
Yep. So
Yeah.
how do we check our CO2? So this is renal,
Yep.
which is metabolic. So I'm gonna write metabolic above this. Metabolic. How do we measure CO2 levels? Which is respiratory. Okay. And these are actually our two compensatory mechanisms for our acid level. So to learn ABGs, I teach the tic-tac-toe method. I'm gonna draw it out here. I draw a tic-tac-toe board.
Yeah, every time. Good job.
Top one is pH. And in the middle here, our normal range is 7.35 to 7.45. The next one, which is our respiratory component, which is EtCO2. That's how we measure it, is 45 to 35. We write those backwards because of the stupid system we're working in. That's okay. And the last one is HCO3, which is our metabolic component, which is bicarb, A2 to 26. These are the numbers you have to have committed to memory. These are very easy, right? 37.35, 7.45, 45, 35, those numbers are there. This one's a new number, and I understand you don't know it, it's okay. 22, 26. Whenever you're given a ABG from the staff, they're usually on a ventilator and they're checking their vent settings. And whenever they get an ABG reading, it looks like a receipt from like the grocery store. Have you ever seen one? Have you seen one?
I have.
So you get this little slip of paper, and it's going to have a whole bunch of values on it. More than these, I like 5. But we only need these 3 numbers. So let's say our piece of paper says the pH is, well, it's on a little piece of paper, 7.25. The CO2 level is 50. And the HCO3 is 24. We're going to go to our tic-tac-toe board here. And we're going to start marking these. This tic-tac-toe, you don't need 3 in a row. You only need 2 in a row. So we're going to mark 7.25 over here. Everybody good with that?
Yeah.
50 is over here. And 24 is in the middle. So this patient is in, so you have to know this side acid. Hold on. Acid. This side is alkalosis or base. This patient happens to be in a respiratory acidosis. With the respiratory component is 50, so you kind of just, I picked the circle in these, the 2. So this patient's in respiratory acidosis. Does that make sense? All right, so this patient, let's say we don't know, the only value we know on this patient would be this one, right? Because we have the entire CO2 hooked up to them. But let's just imagine we had more information in the field. Maybe we had, ABGs in the field. Or maybe this is our patient, we took them to Timmy and they said, here's the lab values, how are we going to fix it? So how would we fix a respiratory acidosis?
Hyperventilating. Wait, no, this is the.
Hold on, let's back it up. Let's lay some more foundation. Let's say this patient has overdosed on opioids, right? And for some reason, there's no Narcan in the county or the hospital. in the weird world, fantasy world that never happens with it.
Okay.
So this patient here is, they're being bagged
Um,
and they run up and say, here's your ABG. How would you fix it? I like where you went with that. You said you would hyperventilate them, right?
Yeah.
Why would you bag them faster?
so they can get all that CO2 out.
They blow off more CO2, you're right. And what happens when you blow off more CO2? What does this number do?
And go.
Yeah, because you're blowing off CO2. And as you blow more CO2 off, and there's an actual formula for all this crap, and I'm just telling you right now, you don't need to know it. But you'll need to know it if you become like a flight paramedic or whatever, and I hope everyone does one day.
Yeah.
But for every 10 that you drop this, it drops that by a certain bit. But let's say we back them down to 35. It is going to drag this number over this way with, because we are compensating for our patient. The patient can't compensate. Now, let me just put one more step on top of that. If you want to blow off more CO2, you can either bag faster or you can bag deeper. And you get more bang for your buck, add more volume in the chest. But what happens when you increase interthoracic pressure? What does it do to the blood? No. What does it do to the blood pressure? It reduces blood pressure. So just putting layers on top of layers here, right? We have a patient who we figured out their CO2 level is really high, which means they're probably acidotic, right? And we need to either bag them faster or deeper. How do I make the decision on fast or deep? Bam, I like it. So if they're hemodynamically on the edge, you do not want to put a bunch of pressure in that chest because you're going to drop the blood pressure. Matter of fact, anytime you bag a patient, you will affect their cardiac output by reducing the amount of blood that makes it to the heart. Because what happens is it squeezes this inferior vena cava, so it reduces the amount of blood coming to the heart, which therefore reduces stroke volume, which reduces cardiac output. So you have a decision to make on this patient. Am I going to bag faster or deeper? If I got a good blood pressure, I'm going to go deeper, and I'm really going to expand that chest because they'll blow off more CO2. And if I have a blood pressure that's kind of in the tank, I'm going to bag them faster. Does that make sense? Heck yeah, it makes sense. And we figured all that out just by looking at these ABGs. Okay, let's do some more. So just one more point on this. It is being acidotic is a natural process. Let's say someone has a seizure and they stop. What happens when you're seizing? Are you breathing?
No.
No. So your CO2 levels are going to go up, right? So your CO2 levels are going to be crap. What do you think the acid level does? Follows it, right? So let's just picture the last seizure call we went on, like grand mal seizure, and you get on scene and the seizure just stopped. How are they breathing?
No, and then if I stick mistake, I kind of breathe real slow.
That's not the way I see them when they count. When I see them, they're going. Anyone ever seen that? So why do they breathe like that? You probably caught them maybe like if it wasn't witness.
Well, because they're
Exactly that.
not trying to blow that at all.
Yeah. So when they first come out of the seizure, it's common for them to go. And what they're trying to do is blow off CO2 and drag their pH level back, because that's what the medulla oblongata bases your respiration on, is your acid level. Yep. So, all right, let's say this one. Let's say the patient has a pH of 7.1, a ethyl CO2 of 40, and an HCO3 of 12. So tell me where to put the X's on this one.
On the pH on the acid side and HCO3 on the acid side and then CO2 in the middle.
HCO3 where?
On the acid side.
On,
On the acid side.
40?
No, it's 12. That's not 12.
Oh, HCO3, my bad. On the acid side, and where are we gonna put CO2?
base.
Right in the middle.
You know, you have
Metal-
metabolic acidosis.
Yeah, we have metabolic acidosis. Now, how do you fix a metabolic acidosis? Just going back to the action potential stuff alone.
Would you give them more, well,
So,
more fluid?
yes.
So they can get a little bit of
That's all right. So think about this. The hydrogen ion is high. They're acidotic, right? And remember, it can put them into hyperkalemia. So we could try to get some calcium. And then, but what's the other drug that we could try too that causes a fluid shift and it binds to
Bicarb.
bicarb?
And
Hot dang it. Yeah, see, look at you guys. Man, you guys are probably better already than 80% of the paramedics that you meet on the street today. Why, they can't explain that to you. So yeah, you want to shift the, since the person is not producing their own bicarb, their kidneys, we're going to give them some bicarb.
So it's bicarb or what?
You try some calcium, and the reason you do calcium is if they're hyperkalemic, you want to keep the membrane together.
it
Gotcha.
helps push it.
Yeah, and that there's another drug too that we don't really talk about much, that does shift potassium. No, that's okay. You've heard of, well, some of y'all have heard it before, that's albuterol. Sometimes the CHF patients, they put them on long treatments of albuterol, and it's an effort to shift potassium. Because those CHF patients become acidotic, and they're going to try to shift the potassium back to albuterol. It just takes a lot of albuterol over a long period of time. That's right. Okay. So here's something I did not mention before. If you get 3 strikes in a row, that's called a mixed gas imbalance. So not only do you have acidosis, there's nothing compensating for the acidosis. So hold on, let me just back that up a little bit. Here's where we were, and I told you we would push some bicarb, which raises the bicarb levels. That drags us this way, right? Which will then drag us back over here. And there is a certain formula where you can calculate how much you shift one, it will shift the other one. So that's another thing we can treat. If you get 3 in a row, it's called a mixed gas imbalance. So let's say all 3 of them are on this side.
If you get 3, you want another one.
That means not only are they acidotic, there's no compensatory mechanism. So guess what we're going to do? We're going to bag them, and we're going to, so bagging takes care of respiratory acidosis, and bicarb takes care of metabolic acidosis.
So you just gotta do both.
It's called mixed what?
Gas imbalance.
So
So all 3 on one side is called a mixed gas imbalance.
So in that instance, you get like bicarb, ventilate fast, maybe put them on some lactate or rigor. That's what you do.
All of the things.
You just do everything.
We're
you
thinking everything.
Yeah, you're going to bag them, which is going to pull this way, which can shift this. And then also you're going to do ringers, bicarb, whatever, to pull this back in an effort to try to get them in a more,
You still check blood pressure if it's too low.
that's right, yeah. If they have just remember that anytime you bag a patient, you will drop the blood pressure. It's not you could, you will. So if you have a good blood pressure, you can bag away, go nice and deep. And if you're worried about the blood pressure,
Crap.
yeah, like say if I took someone, which I got some good pictures from the helicopter where we had nothing for blood pressure and we resuscitated them up to 80 over 20 or 80 over 30. I would not want to bag them hard. I would try to run them low volume, high rate. So when you start running the ventilators, it's like a seesaw metaphor. If you increase the volume, you can decrease the rate. But if you decrease the volume, you have to increase the rate to meet your minute ventilation, metabolic demand. Okay, so let's talk about, okay, so that's step 1 of understanding. Let's do just a couple more. And I'm going to add something in here to really make you a superstar. So let's do one where the pH is 7.65. The HCO3 is 44, and the CO2, the ET is messing my brain up. The CO2 level is 44, and the HCO3 is 30. Okay. pH was 7.65. The CO2 level was 44, and the HCO3 was 30. Metabolic alkalosis. Now, the question is, how are you going to fix that?
Now, see.
What they tend to do is they tend to slow the respirations down and almost stop breathing. Because they're trying to make themselves, so this look like this, correct?
Yeah. Mhm.
So I'm gonna give you a great example of this. Have you ever heard of Tums? Tums. What are those for?
Harper, and acid.
Antacid, right? So they're antacid.
Which means they're alkaline.
So, and you know, they come in those little coffer tabs. So imagine a little kid comes in and I don't know, kids are like goats, right? And they eat a whole handful of those Tums. It's going to force them into a metabolic alkalosis. And the only way they can compensate is to stop breathing. So you're going to come in and find them barely breathing or not breathing. And we need to bag them. We need to bag them. And then, but they're actually trying to compensate for this, right? So, I mean, what are you going to do? Not bag them? Of course, you're going to provide some respiratory support. But you just have to realize that, the reason why they're not breathing is because they're so alkaline that the only way they can compensate is to raise their acid.
You got that white stuff all around the mouth and all the tongue.
Yeah.
No.
All right, so,
That's why I like shrooms.
all right, so let's talk about,
I got a question.
yes.
Is it possible to have direct category?
Like this?
Yeah.
So what are we in right now?
Good.
We're in nothing.
You know, so they're acidotic. They're compensating for it, but this number ain't right. So maybe if they had a brain injury and the computer's not working due to the brain injury, I can see that happening.
You are not a winner.
Yep.
You do not get free in the room.
So let's talk about this next thing. Come back to this. So there's now the next level to this is a term called compensating or non-compensating. So let's say the one we're looking at is 7.25, and the CO2 level is 50, and the bicarb is 29. So this is a respiratory acidosis, but they are compensating by producing more bicarb. So they can't breathe any faster, so they're trying to ramp up the production of bicarb. Right, so where before this was in the middle, we just said it was a respiratory acidosis. Well, since it's in its comfort zone, we would say this is a non-compensating or a respiratory acidosis that's non-compensating. So they just add one more term in there. But if I said the patient's had a compensated respiratory acidosis, that means that they're producing more bicarb with the kidneys to try to compensate for it. So this would be a respiratory acidosis that's being compensated. So this is the compensatory mechanism. They move opposite. Let's say a little like this.
If it is compensated, would you want to do anything for them or just kind of let their body?
No. So they're still acidotic, right? So they need more help. So we're going to bag the patient. And when we bag them, it's going to draw, it's going to bring us over with it. So that first term was called compensated. So I want to throw another one at you. And let's say the pH is 7.35, right on the borderline. So this would be called a fully compensated respiratory acidosis. The only reason they're not technically acidotic is because they have produced so much bicarb. But it's like anything else, you can only compensate for so long. And then eventually you're going to run out of the ability to make bicarb. And then when this goes away, what do you think's going to happen to that excess bicarb? Going to shoot off the edge over here, right?
So what about respiratory alkalosis?
Okay, so it would look like that.
So what would you do for that?
Well, okay, so let's go back to that hyperventilate patient.
Yeah.
We'll say that this is 7.6, this is 12, and we'll just keep bicarb in the middle for now and call it non-compensating. So what, so just so you know, this is the fast mechanism, which is breathing.
Yeah.
And this is the slow mechanism, which is producing bicarb at peak, right?
Yeah.
So it takes a while for the kidneys to start producing more or less bicarb. So right now, imagine you have your patient who's hyperventilating. And they blow that CO2 level all the way down to 12. And all of a sudden, eyes roll back in their head and they go unconscious. And what do? They stop breathing. And the reason they stop breathing is because they're going to build up that CO2 level and it'll drag us back to its normal range.
Oh, okay, so that's like when I have, like an anxiety patient, and they're like, they knock themselves out, they get back to their normal, and then they wake up.
That's exactly what's happening.
Okay.
There was a
So you don't
club
have to do anything.
Yeah. You're gonna.
What we usually do is coach them on their breathing. We'll say, hey, honey, you need to slow your breathing down. Try to breathe in for 5, hold for 5, that square breathing.
Yeah, you can only do so much.
You're right. I know.
I mean, I've been having people pass that on me, and then she wakes up and I'm like, you just need to breathe, and then she'll do it again.
Yeah. All right, what do you call this?
Let me see.
That's a mixed gas imbalance. Anytime you have 3 in a row, it's just a mixed gas imbalance. Everybody's down with that?
Like 4 flags on Cadillac.
All right. What if you have one here, and this one way over there? So you have to just understand that when you build up CO2, it would normally drag this in the same direction. But this one is the compensatory mechanism, so we're compensating. Bam! Fully compensated respiratory acidosis. If it wasn't for the bicarb level, because this person's either not breathing or barely breathing, they would be extremely acidotic, but they are fully compensating with the production of bicarb.
Oh.
I'm telling you, you will never miss another. If you can get this down, you'll never miss an acid-base balance or an ABG question. If you understand how lungs work and blowing off CO2, how kidneys work on producing bicarb and then peeing it off. This the fast mechanism, this is the slow mechanism. We covered that a lot quicker than I thought we would. What do you think?
Wow.
I've never had anybody,
Easier
I'll
than
say
I
this, I've never had anybody explain it like that.
thought.
I was one of those that explained before.
Yeah.
God bless.
My brain,
So that was
I made it super simple.
Well, I can promise you, other people that have explained it have not explained it like
So let's pull up ABG. See a practice. See if we can figure some out from online. I've not tried this, so I don't know if it'll work. Practice ABG.
Hey, that last one you did it also do? Really compensated metabolic alcohols?
Oh, thank you. I guess it could have been. Yeah, could have been a fully compensated. Like they stopped breathing. Yeah, I didn't think about that. Yeah. Nice. All right, this one says 7.23. 60 and 24. Rest, what it say? Are they compensated or not compensated?
John, oh. No, this is.
So respiratory acidosis and
So if it's in the middle, it's compensated.
if it's in its comfort zone, that's its comfort zone. It is not compensated.
It is not compensated.
Correct.
That's what I was saying.
When it steps out of its comfort zone, so this is over here, and currently it's right there. But it takes a while to produce bicarb to compensate with the metabolic or kidneys. It takes a bit of time. that this is currently a non-compensated respiratory accident.
It's like complicated.
It's non-compensated.
If it steps, yeah, if it steps out, it's coming. And it's gonna move opposite, these two are gonna move opposite because of this.
I have no idea. But they're due today. For you. Yeah.
Y'all got that right. This is on abgninja.com. Never.
What is it on?
It's a website called ABG Ninja. That's a practical. Y'all got the first one, right? This one says 7.46, 28, and 19. Let me get rid of this extra.
Yep, that's fine.
Me too, brother.
Is there a compensated?
Compensated respiratory alcoholism.
It's out of the comfort zone.
Bam. Boom.
You're the top guy can do it.
Boom. Y'all good over here?
But he's like, all right, guys, that's the, jump guy got it.
Well, like I said, this is just all foundational for more things we're gonna get into. Yeah, it'll take you 30 minutes. You guys are nailing, or at least understanding arterial blood gas. And you're understanding how the lungs can compensate fast, kidneys can compensate slow. So this is respiratory metabolic, and how they affect the pH level. So, yeah. Okay, that's enough of that. Let me pause this recording. No questions at all.